Misalignment of core values with you and the culture that you're in, with you and the culture you're trying to build, with you and your clients, you and your spouse, you and your coworkers, or the people that you're leading. If there's a misalignment in core values, it will feel like doing a three-legged race with two people that have very different speeds. You'll feel like your cadence is off. You'll feel like it's way harder than it needs to be, and you struggle to get in a rhythm. Not only can misalignment of core values between people cause an issue, but core values with decisions, with offers for your business, as an example. Core values are not just something that you put in the employee handbook. What we need to understand is that we are actually, as humans, driven by our core values. Our core values include sets of beliefs that we have adopted. Now, I think we have to be careful to continue to stay operating with the same set of core values, because as we grow, because we are intended to grow, and as we transform, because we're intended to transform, those core values should move closer to what I would call ideal values. And those ideal values would find alignment with what God's values are. Okay, you have to anchor them in truth. There will always be a gap because we are always in growth and in process. But what you need to understand is that how we behave comes out of what we believe. What we think is triggered by what we see, filtered through what we believe. What we feel is triggered by what we think, right? And they all kind of play together. So as leaders, it's important, not only do we establish core values for our businesses and organizations, but it's important that we understand our own core values, because it can be the difference between making a decision that moves things forward and finds greater alignment and clarity and then attracts the right people, and the opposite would be making a decision that makes you feel further from where you're supposed to go. You bring on the wrong people and it creates all kinds of conflict, and you might feel like you're taking 10 steps back to realign. So before making big decisions, before moving anything forward, rebranding, offering a new product line, changing your business model or service, thinking about your marketing initiatives, thinking about your sales tactics, preparing and planning for strategic action toward goals. Before doing that, make sure that you have taken time to reevaluate, if you've done it before, or evaluate for the first time, your personal core values and then your organization core values. I don't know if you're like me, but there was a season in my life where one of my core values, not my ideal values, but my core values, was productivity. So I would create a list, because at the end of my day, if I didn't feel like I had accomplished something, then it felt like a wasted day. And it actually discouraged me. I valued productivity. So I would, even if I finished something, I'd put it on my list just so I could cross it off. And I'd take big projects and I'd break them down to smaller tasks, and I'd cross off every single one of those tasks, because mentally it helped me to be in line with what I valued at the time, which was productivity. So let me tell you why it's been important for me to reevaluate my core values and to look at where my ideal values are and close the gap. Because productivity and aligning my life according to how productive I am, or the definition of what productivity was, caused me to miss divine interruptions. It caused me to miss divine appointments because I was valuing checking things off versus the process and the journey along the way and all the richness that comes into that, right? That is more valuable to me now than productivity. A productive day for me is more aligned with who I know I am, and it is if I function in those things and I stay aligned to those things of who I know God's made me to be and what He's called me to do. And as long as I have action, no matter what roles I'm playing in, that are in line and in step with that, then that feels more like an accomplished day, or a day that I could say, well done. So you can see, even in my own example, that there's been over time with learning and adjusting a difference of core values. So the way that I set up my time now is much different than what it used to be. I am much less on the to-do list to cross it off as much as what do I need to focus on that's in line with who I am today, and plug those things into my calendar and prioritize them. It's a different way of operation. So same thing with your business. Sometimes as your business grows, you can sense that there's some things that are now out of alignment. You can tell that your own leadership philosophy has shifted, and you need to re-gauge and you need to adjust how you're operating, just like I did with my productivity and my definition there. So let me ask you a few questions that might help you to re-look at, first of all, your own core values. There's lots of ways to dive into this. There's a lot of different exercises, and it's helpful to do it with somebody outside of yourself, because we obviously have a subjective opinion of ourselves. But so bring other people into the process as you do it. And then as you develop core values for your organization, if you have a team, it's important to bring those people in and to evaluate what's the culture that you've been building together. So here's a question that you might ask yourself. Number one is, as a pattern, what are you drawn toward? Maybe the people or the types of activities or the experiences. And conversely, what drives you absolutely crazy? So for me, I am actually drawn to people who are real, raw, and a little bit edgy. I value authenticity. I think because the honesty helps me to trust them quicker. And I just appreciate the realness and the drop of the mask. So I'm drawn toward that. So then conversely, I am turned away from people who I feel like are trying to prove something to me, or be fake, or set themselves up above other people, or come off as a certain way. If I can sense any sort of a mask and feel like it's difficult to get past the superficial, then I tend to not jive as well with those people. Okay, second question that you can ask yourself is, as a pattern, what kinds of things trigger you, irritate you, annoy you, make you mad, and why? So initially you might come up with some things that some people in your life are currently doing. And that's okay, that's a start. But think a little bit deeper and ask yourself, why does it bother me so much? What do I feel like is being threatened or unmet by them doing that thing or not doing that thing? An example for myself is micromanaging. Thus, it's a great fit for me to run my own business because I don't micromanage myself. Micromanaging to me speaks a lack of trust in my capability or a lack of trust in my follow through. And so I value people trusting me and believing in my capability. So that is something, a core value that I have when working with a team, that is extremely important to me. Okay, so you could ask yourself the triggering questions. And then think of a big personal decision that you've made in the last year. Why did you make that decision? What drove that decision? What were you trying to improve, establish, or protect? Now, sometimes when we make a big decision, we realize that the value that was driven by is not one that you want to have. Maybe it was driven by people pleasing, and you realize, man, that is not making everybody happy, is not a value or a belief that I want to operate from. So you've identified a growth gap, and that's okay. Like I said, there's going to be the gap between core values and ideal values, and it's all used for growth as we learn to align. So for myself, we moved across the country. And for me, the reason behind that was I want to live life intentionally and on purpose, with purpose. And there were things that we valued as a family and where we wanted to raise our family, in the culture, I guess, that we put them in, that was going to be outside of where we currently were. I was also taking into consideration what I want to expose my kids to, and then we were bringing my parents as well, and what was going to help them to thrive. So I wanted to choose on purpose a place that would instigate growth and thriving, because that's a value to me. Growth and alignment to thriving and to living life on purpose is a value. Okay, the last question or exercise you can ask yourself is, at the end of my life, you might have heard this exercise before. It's the eulogy exercise. At the end of my life, The most important people in my life, what do I want them to say about my life and about me? Those things will most likely identify your ideal values. They may not be things that are currently set to be your mode of operation. They may not be the things that are currently driving you, but that's okay, because as you identify those ideals and you see the gap, then you can start to move your decisions, move your thoughts, and shift beliefs and work on that. And there's specific strategies that need to be applied in order to do that. You don't just change a belief overnight. But when you see the gap and you see where you're going, then that helps you to eliminate what is a good yes and what is a strong no. To wrap this up, I worked with a client recently who had read lots of books about this, who had been in lots of conversations and events and places where they were encouraging them to do this. Most business leaders or leaders of organizations have heard about the core values. Like I said, the mission statement, the vision statement, the core values end up in an employee handbook, but it's nothing more than that. So I worked with her recently, asking her questions to help her dive into things. I'd bring up scenarios or bring up certain circumstances that helped her to dig down to what the actual core values were. And one thing that she made mention, which is why I referred to it before, was that it was difficult for her to identify it in and of herself because she's blinded to her own patterns and habits. Right? We have blind spots. So it was helpful to her to have someone who's objective to help her look at that. So if you feel like this is a place that you're at, you're finding misalignment, you know that you're making big decisions and you want to make sure that those decisions are in line with where you really want to be going, because you don't have time to waste and you don't have money to waste, then reach out. I'd love to help you identify your own personal core values and then make sure that your business core values are in alignment.